Are you familiar with what a meta-analysis is?
Explain it to me.
Okay.
No.
So a meta-analysis, so the best way I could describe it is when you kind of, and in a way, all of us as content consumers, right? If you're listening to this podcast, I doubt that we're the only Bills podcast you listen to. So you probably listen to a couple of shows, right, Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in doing so, you've gathered this wealth of knowledge from multiple, multiple streams of, you know, information, whether that be articles, whether that be other podcasters, whether that be from bills or draft analysts, all this good stuff. And what I've done is I pretty much compiled a wealth of pros, cons, and just general draft little tidbits on this Dalton Kincaid pick. Okay. And that will pretty much give you the overall consensus of how the general public feels about this pick. And then we can add our little sprinkles in. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay.
We're in
So,
the meta.
yeah, we're in the metaverse. Well, let's just start off with just some overall arching notes here. And we're going to start off kind of weird because that's pretty much how I would say a majority of this fan base felt initially with the pick. And Pete Prisco at CBS graded it as a C pick. He said, I thought it was weird considering he had Michael Mayer as a better prospect. Now we know Michael Mayer went way later, but in a way, I think that kind of echoed how some of us fans were feeling at the moment because it did feel kind of like a head scratcher, right? But it was like one of those things where you had to sit, really think about it and go like, God damn it, Bean, you're a genius. Like, at least
Had
that's
that
how
slow burn.
yeah, it was like, and I think what made it really validating for me is when they when they jump the Cowboys and they just like pan to like the Cowboys room and you just see Mike McCarthy just kind of sitting at the desk just going like, and then you just see Jerry Jones like it just looked like the air just got taken out of their like balloon. They were just like, I don't really, there's nothing we can do. But I'm gonna go through some of these comments here and then I'm gonna let you kind of like chime in and just talk about it. How you feel about that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, so Greenlight podcast with Chris Long. Brandon Bean was actually on that. And the way that he kind of made that move is that he was analyzing the teams around him, figure out what their top needs were in case, and in this case, tight end was only a real big need in terms of Brandon Bean for two teams, the Cowboys and the Chargers. So when the Chargers, when Kincaid made it past the Chargers, Bean was like, oh, that's cool. I wasn't looking to move up, but if the guy's there, then yeah. And Jacksonville already had moved back at that point. And when Brandon Bean called, allegedly, I don't know if you saw this or heard about this, but Brandon being called and Trent, the GM over there, was like antsy. He was like, "Man, I just moved back. Like, how?" And he just started asking. He started grilling Brandon Bean, like, "Who do you want?" And Brandon's like, "I don't really necessarily want to tell you what I want." And he's like, "All right, offense or defense?" And we ultimately know that Jacksonville took an offensive tackle. So Brandon Bean goes like, "Offense," and then he's just like, "All right, I need more information." And he goes like, "Big or small?" And then Brandon goes like, "Medium."
Mm, Uh, Firmly medium.
Yeah, and at that point, he goes like, "Are you trying to take a tight end?" And it was more or less that gave it away. But he says, "I'll call you back." Brandon Bean has to call him eventually after like a couple minutes and says like, "Hey, are we doing this? I'm not taking your tackle. Your tackle is gonna be there." And ultimately worked out for both parties. But I just think that was so funny that in order for Brandon Bean to make that move, he had to analyze the people around him and basically convince another GM like, "Hey, I'm not going to take your guy." But he also, in doing so, he had to like basically show his hand, which I imagine Brandon Bean didn't want to do.
Yeah, just a little side note on I love this time of year where like some of the like every year it seems like we get a little bit more seeing behind the curtains on the draft and just like kind of the nuts and bolts of what they're all doing on draft
Hmm.
day. And I'm sure you saw the one where he was talking to Joe Shane over with the Giants,
Hmm.
and they had basically had conversations in place of like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm not planning on going up this year, but if I go up, like, are we talking? Joe Shane's like, yeah, give me a call. And you know,
Yeah.
he's like,
It didn't
hey,
work out.
I'm getting ready to go up. We got this deal, and Joe Shane was like, actually, we're going up too. So,
Yeah. I think they wanted a wide
you're on your
receiver.
own, kid.
Yeah. Sucks to suck. Sorry. No love lost.
Thanks for everything. Bye.
Yeah. So let's talk about the rest of these people. It comes from Todd McShay, Marcus Spears, Joe Klatt, Daniel Jeremiah, Chris Sims, Skip Bayless, and of course the one and only notorious Joe Marino. And they're pretty much, I'm just gonna read these out. Like these two are gonna put up big time numbers. Marcus Spears says, love the pick. Offense can be super flexible, take stuff off of Josh Allen's plate. Home run for the Bills. Joe Klatt says, love this pick. Says Kincaid is more of a flex tight end than Michael Mayer. So that's one thing to notice, right? I think Kincaid was universally known as the best move tight end and the best catching tight end. So that's awesome. Daniel Jeremiah says, and this has been a real big quote, if the rest of the league lets the Bills get Dalton Kincaid, they get what's coming to them, or
Let's
more or less that.
go.
And that he's the number ninth person on their draft board. So the fact that we got him at 25 in on Daniel Jeremiah's board is fantastic value. Chris Sims, he says he's a top 15 guy in the draft. Again, fantastic value. But this is the part that I found weird. Chris Sims said that the Bills panicked because there was a run on wide receivers. But from where Brandon Beane kind of was, he was like, I just didn't think this guy was going to be here. And I don't necessarily think that the Bills wanted any of the wide receivers unless they fell to them naturally. I think they liked them, but they weren't in love with them. You know?
Yeah, so what I think is really interesting on that Chris Sims point is when you were talking before about um, being looking at who is ahead of them and whatnot. So I've watched so many interviews with Bean. I apologize. I don't know which one this one was, but he was talking about once he saw Kincaid making it to like 21, he started
That's the
making
Chargers,
phone
yeah.
calls.
Yeah.
Right. So the run at receiver didn't happen till after that. So it's kind of signaling to me as we
I
get
thought the
this
first
more
one got off on
information.
20
Um,
to
I
Seattle.
think JSN went, and then it was the other two that were expected to maybe fall to us.
Hmm.
But yeah, JSN went to Seattle at 20. But if Bean was already making those phone calls at 21, that kind of signals to me that Kincaid might have been just his target all
All
along,
along. True.
and he was doing the chestnut checkers type deal.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't really lie about wanting to get an offensive weapon. He did get one. Let's see here. Skip Bayless, he was super upset that the Bills jumped over the Cowboys. He said the Buffaloed the Cowboys, which I think is hilarious. And then lastly, Joe Marino said, you got a first round talent, newish to the position, started playing football senior year of high school, and a no-star recruit. All of that really, really encouraging. And I guess, what are your general thoughts from all of those talking points that I just laid out in front of you?
So I love the move, and in particular the conversation that Bean was having about making the phone calls starting at 21. It tells me that he wasn't kind of settling for somebody that went to him. I don't love trading up in the first round, but I think there was a pretty good chance that this was the Cowboys pick.
Yeah.
So I do like it in that aspect of, if that's your guy, don't let him get away. Um, I love it sounds like he's going to be used largely as a wide receiver, but I like him being labeled as a tight end and having the experience at tight end.
Mhm.
The ability to run two tight end sets and be able to run out of that. If you're talking about, the scouting report on him is that he's
Yeah,
not
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
eh,
Don't worry. Don't
not a
worry.
not a great run blocker, but he's willing and he's adequate at it. Okay, so you give me that. Gabe Davis, who's a good blocker on the other side, Dawson Knox, and the looks that you can give between Josh Allen being able to run, the running backs out of the backfield, you know, Diggs, Davis, these two tight ends. I just think there's so many different looks that you can get to,
Right.
especially down in the red zone, that I think it's
Right.
just going to have a
So the
huge
general
impact.
consensus that I got from all those previous comments was that overall, the Bills were pretty much praised for that move, right? And it was generally understood by all those people that this was a talent, top tier talent in the draft, and the Bills got one at the end of the first round. Really exciting stuff. Now, let's go into the pros and cons. And I know you just kind of like basically
I
said the
jumped the
pros
gun
and
on the
cons.
meta analysis.
Yeah, more or less. Way to go, guy.